They left me with 3 bullets, 1 broken blade, and the order not to come back. The words didn't sting when they said them. Orders never do. They settle somewhere behind the ribs, heavy but familiar, like a weight you've trained with long enough to forget it was ever added. The industrial zone was dead. Factories gutted to steel bones. Concrete cracked open like old scars. Beyond it, the forest pressed close, dark and wet, swallowing sound. Smoke crawled low along the ground, mixing with the smell of oil and burnt wiring. Cold gnawed through my jacket and into the places that already hurt. I checked my ammo by touch. 3 bullets. 1 blade with a snapped tip, sharpened badly enough to tear instead of slice. Enough. Drones hummed somewhere above the cloud cover. Council scouts. Distant, patient. They never rushed to kill if time could do it cleaner. My leg throbbed where shrapnel had kissed muscle earlier. Not a clean wound. The kind that slows you down in small, annoying ways. I adjusted my stance, shifted weight, cataloged the damage like they'd taught me. Don't think in terms of pain, Instructor Hale used to say. Pain is a distraction. Think in terms of function. Functionally, I could still run. Not fast, not far, but far enough. I caught flashes of the pack as I moved. Memories spliced in without permission. Hand signals in the dark. Breath, counting before a breach. Someone laughing too loud over comms and getting smacked for it. No names. Names made things harder to leave behind. They'd pulled back fast. Too fast. That was when it clicked. Not like a revelation, more like a quiet confirmation. Routes compromised. Codes burned. The council didn't find packs by accident. Someone always opened the door. We were sold. The anger came sharp and clean, slicing through the fog in my head. No panic, no grief, just heat, steady and useful. I wasn't surprised. I'd trained long enough to know how systems worked, what they protected, what they erased. I stayed because it made sense. One fighter slowing pursuit gave the others time to disappear. I knew the terrain better than any drone algorithm. I knew where sound died, where heat signatures blurred. And I knew exactly how long I could keep the council busy before they brought something bigger. I set the charge myself, fingers numb as the timer blinked red. My pulse stayed even, breathing in for 4, out for 6. Another lesson. You're not an omega here, Hale had said once, shoving me back to my feet. You're a weapon. Act like it. The first drone broke through the smoke just as the explosion ripped the ground open. Light, noise, pressure. I flew, hit concrete hard enough to knock the air out of my lungs, then rolled into darkness as something hot tore across my side. I tasted blood. The world tilted, steadied, tilted again. Above me, engines adjusted, recalculated. I dragged myself toward the tree line, teeth clenched, vision narrowing to a thin, angry line. I was never raised to be chosen, only to survive. I woke to white light and the smell of disinfectant, not the clean kind. The kind the council used to pretend this wasn't a slaughterhouse with better branding. My wrists burned. Magnetic cuffs, tight enough to cut circulation if I pulled wrong. The floor beneath me was cold concrete, damp with old oil, and something darker that had soaked in long ago. A hangar, half collapsed, its ceiling patched with temporary panels and exposed beams. Council floodlights washed everything in sterile white, erasing shadows, erasing comfort. I tested the cuffs anyway. Pain flared sharp and bright through my side, stealing my breath. I hissed, then laughed under it. Rookie mistake. I'd known better. My body was already tallying losses. Blood, strength, time. Footsteps approached. Measured. Unhurried. He stopped just outside my reach. I looked up. The Alpha was immaculate. No torn gear, no blood on his gloves. His uniform fit like it had been grown around him, not worn. Dark hair pulled back, posture straight without stiffness. His scent hit a moment later, controlled, muted, like it had been filed down to something acceptable. Perfect. I hated him on principle. You're awake, he said, voice calm even. Not curious, not pleased. I surged up, ignoring the way my vision blurred, twisting my bound hands to catch him off guard. He moved before I finished the thought. One smooth step in, grip like iron on my shoulder. I drove my knee up, clipped his thigh, felt the impact jar my bones. He didn't even grunt. The world spun as he redirected me, forcing me down with precise pressure, not force. My side screamed. My muscles betrayed me. I went down hard. Breath knocked loose again. I lay there, chest heaving, staring at his boots. That was inefficient, he said mildly. I laughed, wet and ugly. You should see me on a good day. He crouched, bringing us eye level. Up close, his eyes were the color of cold steel, focused, unreadable. He didn't look at me like prey. He looked like I was a problem already solved. I am authorized to transport you, he said. Omega designation. Combat trained. Status. Recoverable. There it was. The lie wrapped in clean language. Destination? I asked, already knowing. Processing. The word landed heavier than a bullet. Something hot and vicious curled in my chest. I pulled against the cuffs again, just enough to lean forward. And I spat. It caught him on the cheek, stark against perfect skin. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Surprise. I bared my teeth. You won't keep me. He wiped his face slowly, studying the smear like it interested him more than it should. No, he said after a moment, quiet. Probably not. And just like that, the perfect alpha cracked, just enough for me to see it. Council transport smelled like metal, and nothing else. No oil, no sweat, no human mess. Just polished alloy and recycled air scrubbed clean of personality. The kind of place where sounds died fast, and thoughts echoed too loudly. I was secured to the floor this time, restraints threaded through reinforced. Rings, my back against a wall that vibrated faintly with the engine's hum. Cargo bay. Not a cell. Appropriate. Kael stood across from me, braced with one hand on a support rail as the transport lifted. He hadn't said a word since we left the hangar. Not to threaten. Not to reassure. Like silence was part of the procedure. So, I said, flexing my fingers until the cuffs bit. Is this your usual hobby? Collecting omegas in bulk? His eyes flicked to me, then away. No flare of irritation, no tightening of jaw, just acknowledgement, filed and dismissed. I don't have hobbies, he said. That's tragic. No response. I sighed theatrically, letting my head fall back against the wall. The motion tugged at my side, pain blooming dull and insistent. I breathed through it, slow and controlled. I let my scent bleed out deliberately. Not a surge, not a plea. Just enough to test him. Enough that any alpha worth the title would feel it crawl under their skin. Kael didn't even blink. Interesting. Most alphas reacted before they realized they were reacting. A shift of weight, a hitch in breath. Something. Kael stayed exactly where he was, gaze fixed on a status panel, eyes never lingering on me long enough to count his eye contact. Like he was avoiding something. Am the first boring you? I asked. No. Because you're doing a great job of pretending I'm a crate. You're secured cargo, he said evenly. That's not pretending. I smiled to myself. Weaponized honesty. Cute. The transport banked, gravity shifting. For half a second, the restraints slackened, not much, but enough. I moved on instinct, rolling my shoulder, twisting my wrist just right. Pain flared, white hot, but one cuff loosened a fraction. Alarms didn't sound. Yet, I yanked, teeth clenched. Metal screeched softly. Kael moved. He crossed the bay in 2 strides, boot coming down hard on the chain, pinning it. He didn't touch me otherwise. Didn't grab. Didn't loom. Just looked down. Our eyes met, really met, for the first time. Something passed between us then. Recognition, maybe. Or warning. You're injured, he said. Not a threat. A statement. Still biting, I replied, breathless. His gaze lingered a second longer than before. Then he stepped back, restoring distance, control. The chain stayed locked. For now. I leaned my head against the wall again, smiling through the ache. Let him hunt. I wasn't done running. Rain turned the city into a mirror. Neon bled across wet asphalt, colors stretching and breaking under my boots as I ran. Sirens wailed somewhere far behind me, layered under the steady thrum of council engines adjusting search patterns overhead. The outskirts blurred together, half-abandoned housing blocks, skeletal, billboards, service tunnels that smelled like rust and old water. I timed it right. Council transports didn't slow unless ordered. They followed corridors of airspace like rails, predictable in their precision. The moment we crossed into the outer districts, I triggered the emergency release I'd been working on. Since takeoff, overloading the sensor feedback loop just long enough to mask one missing heat signature. Mine. The impact when I hit the roof hurt more than I expected. Pain flared down my side, stealing a sharp breath, but I rolled with it, tucking and moving before the transport could register the anomaly. I dropped into an alley 2 levels down, landing hard and staying low as rain swallowed the sound. Run. Turn. Cut. Hide. I moved the way they'd taught me, never in straight lines, never twice through the same cover. I counted breaths, not heartbeats. I used reflections instead of looking back, tracking motion in windows and puddles. Drones swept overhead, their searchlights slicing through the rain. I froze when one passed too close, pressing myself into the shadow of a service door, pulse steady despite the fire in my muscles. I was almost clear. The forest line waited just beyond the last stretch of industrial spillover, trees, and darkness. No clean angles, no perfect sight lines. The council hated that. I smiled, teeth chattering, and pushed harder. That was when the pressure shifted. I felt him before I saw him, the way you feel a storm roll in, sudden and undeniable. Footsteps splashed behind me, measured but fast, matching my pace without chasing it. Not panicked, not rushed. Him. I vaulted a barrier, hit the ground running, cut left into a construction zone rigged with half-finished frames and hanging cables. I doubled back through my own path, hoping to confuse tracking algorithms. He didn't slow. I spun, blade flashing in my hand, and slashed for his throat. He caught my wrist mid-strike. The impact jarred my bones. He twisted, using my momentum against me, sending me skidding across wet concrete. I came up on one knee, breath ragged, vision tunneling. Kael stood a few feet away, rain slicking his hair back, eyes sharp in the neon glow. "You're wasting strength," he said, voice almost lost under the rain. I laughed, the sound rough and breathless. I was trained to. I lunged again, slower this time, my body protesting every move. He disarmed me cleanly, sending the blade skittering away, then forced me down with controlled force. Knee to my chest, weight precise enough not to crush what was already broken. For a second, we stayed like that, rain pounding down, city noise closing in. His grip loosened just enough for me to breathe. Our eyes locked. There it was again. That flicker. Not hesitation, calculation, something like respect, buried deep and carefully ignored. He secured the cuffs again, movements efficient, almost gentle. As he pulled me to my feet, anger burned hot in my chest, but threaded through it was something else. A sharp, unwilling spark of satisfaction. I'd made him work for it. And next time, I'd go farther. The tunnel smelled wrong. Too many bodies had passed through recently, stirring dust that hadn't settled yet. Old metal, damp stone, the faint bite of ozone from cheap energy weapons. I caught it a second too late. "Down," Kael said. I didn't argue. The first shot sparked off the wall where my head had been. I rolled, pain screaming through my side, came up with my back to the concrete and my eyes already mapping exits. 3 figures dropped from the upper ledge. Not council. No clean lines, no regulated gear. Scavengers. Or worse, freelancers who sold bodies to whoever paid fastest. Great. Everyone wanted a piece. I moved without thinking. So did Kael. That was the problem. He should have slowed me down, treated me like a liability. Instead, he shifted to cover my blind side exactly when I needed it, his strike landing a heartbeat before mine. I went low, sweeping a leg. He went high, disabling an arm. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. Our movements locked together like we'd trained this way for years. A blade flashed too close to my ribs. I twisted, felt fabric tear instead of skin, and drove my elbow back. Bone cracked. Someone screamed. Another body hit the ground hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The last attacker hesitated. That was enough. Kael ended it with brutal efficiency. One precise blow, no wasted motion. Silence followed, broken only by my breathing and the distant drip of water somewhere deeper in the tunnel. I staggered back a step. Then my legs gave out. I hit the ground on my knees, hands slick with blood. Mine. The adrenaline burned off fast, leaving pain behind like a cruel afterimage. My vision dimmed at the edges. Kael was there instantly. He knelt in front of me, hands firm but careful, inspecting the damage. The shrapnel wound had reopened, blood soaking through my jacket, dark and warm. I braced myself for restraints, for orders. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a med kit. No, I muttered automatically, pride flaring stupid and sharp. Don't. He didn't look up, didn't argue, just cut the fabric away cleanly, movements practiced. He pressed gauze to the wound, pressure precise enough to stop the bleeding without sending stars across my vision. I hissed, then went still. The contact grounded me in a way I hated. He worked in silence, wrapping the bandage snug, securing it with a strip torn from his own sleeve when the kit ran short. Close enough that I could feel the steady calm of him, like gravity pulling everything else into place. My body responded before my brain could stop it, muscles easing, breath slowing. Relief. I clenched my jaw, anger flaring hot and immediate. At him. At myself. Don't relax. Don't trust. Kael leaned back, eyes flicking to my face, reading more than I wanted him to. You'll live, he said. I swallowed, forcing tension back into my limbs, forcing the distance where it belonged. Lucky me, I snapped. But even as I said it, my hands were still trembling. Not from fear, from the fact that, for a moment, I'd let myself rest. The shelter was little more than a maintenance room sealed off from the main tunnel. Bare walls, a flickering emergency, strip casting dull yellow light. The kind of place no one stayed in unless they had no better options. The air was still, heavy with dust, and the faint antiseptic smell of the bandage at my side. Kael stood watch near the door. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, knees drawn up more to keep pressure off my wound than for comfort. The silence stretched, thick and uneasy, broken only by the soft hum of failing power somewhere behind the walls. It was worse than the fighting. You always this quiet, I said finally. Or is it just me? He didn't turn. Silence is efficient. I snorted. You'd love the council brochures. That earned me a glance, brief, measured, gone too fast to read. I shifted, testing the bandage. It held. Of course it did. He hadn't rushed. That bothered me more than if he had. So, I continued, unable to leave it alone. When we get there. Processing. What happens after? You'll be evaluated, he said. Assigned. The word sat wrong in my chest. Assigned, I repeated. To a unit? Or to an alpha? His shoulders tensed. Barely. But I saw it. The system prioritizes stability, he said. Pairs reduce volatility. They keep omegas manageable, I cut in. My voice stayed even, but heat burned behind my eyes. They don't want love, they want obedience. He turned fully then, facing me. His expression was calm, but something underneath it had shifted, like a foundation cracking where no one could see. That's not how it's supposed to, he began. That's how it works. The words came out flat, sharp enough to end the sentence cleanly. I've seen it from the inside. Omegas train to wait, to yield, to disappear into someone else's shadow. You call it balance. I call it a leash. You're wrong, he said, but there was no conviction behind it. Just repetition. I laughed softly. You really believe that? Or do you just need to? He didn't answer right away. Outside the shelter, something moved. Distant, metallic. A drone, maybe. Or just the tunnel settling. Kael's attention flicked outward for a second before returning to me. You were trained to fight, he said instead. That's not standard, No, I agreed. It isn't. I met his gaze and held it this time, forcing him to look back. They taught me to kill because it was useful, not because it made me equal. His jaw tightened. The alpha mask slipped just enough for doubt to show through, thin and dangerous. The system isn't perfect, he said slowly, but it prevents chaos. I shrugged, ignoring the pull in my side. So does a cage. Doesn't make it right. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Kael looked away first. For the first time since he'd caught me, he didn't look certain. And that was more unsettling than any threat he could have made. I leaned my head back against the wall, eyes closing briefly. If he kept questioning, the system would break him. If he didn't, it would destroy us both. Either way, something had already shifted. And there was no going back. The Council's archive wasn't a place, it was a state of mind. Cold, orderly, endless. The access node hummed softly as I knelt in front of it, fingers moving with careful precision despite the dull ache in my side. Kael stood watch at the corridor entrance, back to me, posture alert. He hadn't asked what I was doing. That alone told me more than any permission ever could. The system resisted at first. Layered encryption, adaptive locks, security. Routines designed to discourage curiosity rather than stop it outright. The Council preferred obedience over intelligence. Curiosity could always be punished later. I smiled thinly and went deeper. I'd been trained for combat, not code. But survival had a way of making you versatile. Stolen credentials, rerouted permissions, a ghost of a signature left behind to keep the alarms asleep. The interface flickered, then resolved into clean lines of text and data streams. Archives, operations, classifications, losses. I searched by pack designation before I could stop myself. The results populated instantly. Names scrolled past. Units, roles, threat assessments. Redacted sections bled black across the screen like deliberate erasures. I recognized formations, strategies. Old patrol routes we'd abandoned months ago because they were compromised. They hadn't been compromised. They'd been handed over. My jaw clenched as I scrolled. Dates lined up too neatly. Withdrawals timed just before council sweeps. Supply drops rerouted. Comms delays that had always been blamed on interference. Betrayal wasn't loud. It was administrative. I pulled up the final report. Status, neutralized. Assets recovered, partial. Remaining elements, inconsequential. My vision tunneled, the words blurring until I forced myself to breathe again. In for 4, out for 6. Pain pulsed in time with my heartbeat, grounding me whether I wanted it or not. I wasn't looking for closure. I was looking for proof. The authorization field sat at the bottom of the report, neat and final. One name, one signature. I didn't read it yet. Not immediately. I scrolled back up, memorizing every line, every coded justification. The language was clinical, careful, threat to stability, preventive action, the same phrases Kael had used without realizing it, echoing policy instead of thought. Footsteps shifted behind me. Kael glanced back, his eyes flicking from the screen to my face, searching for something. You shouldn't be in there, he said quietly. I know, I replied. My finger hovered over the authorization field. Whatever name waited there would change everything. Not just what I knew, but what I did next. I felt it settling into place already. Heavy and inevitable. The system didn't care. It never did. I exhaled slowly and scrolled down. Ready or not, the truth was about to stop being theoretical. The name stared back at me like it had always been there. Not hidden, not encrypted. Just placed. Clean. Official. Authorization. Kael Harrow. For a moment I didn't breathe. The archive room felt too small, the hum of the system suddenly deafening in my ears. My fingers hovered over the screen, useless now, as if touching the name again would somehow change it. It didn't. The letters stayed sharp, perfectly aligned, indifferent to the way my chest tightened around them. I laughed. It came out wrong. Short, cracked, almost surprised. Of course, I said softly. Of course it was you. Behind me, Kael went still. I turned slowly, keeping my body loose, Casual. The way you do when you're standing too close to something explosive. He met my gaze without flinching. That was new. Or maybe I was just noticing it now. You knew, I said. Not a question. He looked at the screen. Then back at me. I suspected what you'd find. Suspected, I echoed. That's a generous word. Silence stretched between us, tight and brittle. You signed the order, I said. My voice was steady. That scared me more than if it had shaken. You didn't just follow it. You authorized it. Yes. The word landed like a gunshot. Something snapped inside me. Heat flooded my veins, sharp and blinding, drowning out the ache in my side, the fatigue, everything but him. I crossed the distance between us before he could move, shoving him back against the console hard enough to rattle the screen. My forearm pressed against his throat. Say it again, I growled. Say it like it meant something. His pulse beat fast under my arm. He didn't fight me, didn't reach for a weapon, just held my gaze, jaw tight. I signed it, he said. I believed it was necessary. Necessary. The word burned. Necessary for who? I demanded. For the council? For your precious stability? You erased us like a footnote. You were classified as a destabilizing element, he said, and then stopped, like he'd heard himself too late. Your pack was operating outside containment protocols. We were surviving, I shot back. You call that a threat? His eyes flickered. Guilt. Doubt. Something ugly and human. I followed the system, he said. I believed in it. I slammed him harder into the console, the impact jarring my wound, but I didn't care. I leaned in close, breathing hard, the scent of him sharp and maddening in my nose. You didn't believe, I said. You chose. You just didn't want to admit it. For a split second, I thought about killing him. It would have been easy. My hand was already there. All that control, all that perfection, ended in one decisive move. Justice, neat and final. Instead, I stepped back. The rage didn't vanish. It coiled tighter, colder, sharper. I turned away from the console, from the name that had already carved itself into me. Get away from me, I said quietly. Kael didn't move at first. When he finally did, it was slow, careful. Like he was the one injured now. I won't excuse it, he said, but I won't deny it either. I looked at him one last time. Really looked. Not the perfect alpha. Not the hunter. Just a man standing in the wreckage of his own choices. Good, I said. Because I won't forgive it. Then I walked out, leaving the archive, leaving the truth, leaving him standing, there with the weight of my pack's ghosts settling squarely on his shoulders. Whatever came next, there was no going back. I didn't go far, not because I couldn't, but because running blindly after that would have been stupid. Rage made you loud. Loud got you killed. I took shelter in a maintenance corridor one level down, pressed my back to the cold wall, and forced my breathing to slow. In for 4. Out for 6. The anger didn't fade, but it sharpened, settling into something I could aim. That was when Kael's calm activated. I hadn't meant to listen. I just didn't move. The council's voice came through crisp and disembodied, stripped of anything resembling humanity. Hunter Harrow. Status report. Asset recovery is behind schedule. Kael stood in the archive doorway above me, framed by sterile light. From here, I could see his profile, still, composed, exactly as they'd built him. Encounter complications, he said. The Omega sustained further injuries during transport. Then accelerate the timeline, the voice replied. Processing capacity is prepared. Deliver the asset or terminate if resistance continues. Terminate. My hands curled into fists. There was a pause, just long enough to notice. Negative, Kael said. Silence crackled over the channel. Clarify. He's dead, Kael said. The words didn't land right away. My chest tightened, sharp and sudden, like my body was trying to react before my mind caught up. I stared at him from the shadows, waiting for the lie to break. For something in his voice to give it away. Nothing did. Fatal injuries sustained during escape attempt. Kael continued evenly. Body unrecoverable. Another pause. Longer this time. Transmit confirmation, the council said. Kael stepped back into the archive. I heard the system respond. Commands issued, files accessed, data shifting, erasing. He moved fast, efficiently, like he'd done this before. Except he hadn't. I knew that as surely as I knew my own pulse. The archive lights dimmed briefly, then returned to their neutral glow. The hum changed pitch, settling into a new, quieter rhythm. Final. Record updated, the system intoned. Asset status. Deceased. I swallowed hard. The council acknowledged with a clipped confirmation and cut the connection without ceremony. No condolences. No follow-up. Just closure. Kael stood alone in the light for a moment after that. Shoulders squared. Hands empty. He didn't move like a man relieved. He moved like a man who'd just stepped off a ledge and hadn't hit the ground yet. He turned, slowly, and his gaze found the shadows where I stood. For the first time since we'd met, there was no order behind his eyes. Only choice. And whatever he'd just done, he couldn't take it back. Being declared dead didn't make me free. It made me valuable. I figured that out the moment the air changed. No drones, no searchlights, no clean council formations sweeping streets with mathematical precision. Instead, the city went quiet in the wrong way. Too empty, too patient. Like the whole place was holding its breath. They don't believe you, I muttered. Kael didn't argue. He moved faster, sharper now, cutting through service corridors and abandoned transit lines like he was mapping the city in real time. No comms, no guidance, just instinct and experience, stripped of official backing. That scared me more than the hunter he'd been before. We split at the edge of an old freight yard, rusted rails, skeletal cranes looming overhead, fog crawling low along the ground. It was my idea. I knew the terrain. I could move quieter alone. I should have known better. The first net dropped without warning, energy filaments snapping tight around my legs, slamming me to the ground hard enough to knock the breath out of my lungs. Pain exploded through my side, hot and blinding. I rolled, clawing at the mesh, blade flashing. Too slow. The second net took my arms. I screamed, raw and furious, as the charge pulsed, locking my muscles in place. Figures emerged from the fog. Council operatives this time, not hunters. Black armor. No insignia. No witnesses. Asset confirmed, one of them said. Alive. So much for dead. I twisted my head just enough to see Kael on the far side of the yard, frozen mid-step as the trap sealed behind him. Barriers snapped into place, cutting off his path. He looked at me, not calculating, not assessing odds, just seeing. That was when I understood. This wasn't about me slipping through their fingers. It was about flushing him out. You lied to us, the operative said calmly, approaching me. You erased council property. That makes you defective. My vision swam, edges darkening. I forced myself to focus, to breathe through the pain, to stay conscious. If I went out now, this ended the same way it always did. Get away from him, Kael said, voice low and dangerous. They laughed. He moved anyway. The barriers flared as he hit them, energy crackling bright enough to light the yard. He staggered back, teeth clenched, blood seeping from a cut at his temple. Still, he didn't stop trying. I fought the net again, screaming in frustration, in rage, in something dangerously close to fear. This was the council's favorite trick, make the choice impossible. They dragged me upright, locking restraints over the net, forcing me to stand where Kael could see me. One of them leaned in close, voice pitched low and almost kind. You should have stayed dead, he said. I bared my teeth. You should have killed me the first time. The operative smiled. Behind him, Kael straightened slowly, shoulders squaring despite the blood, despite the trap closing in on both of us. His eyes met mine across the yard, steady and unflinching. Whatever this was, whatever they thought they'd set in motion, it wasn't going to end the way they planned. But as the restraints tightened and the fog swallowed the ground beneath my feet, one truth cut through everything else. The council hadn't lost control. They'd just tightened the noose. And this time they meant to see who would hang. The first thing I learned when the trap snapped shut was this: the council never planned to take us alive. The restraints bit down harder as power surged through the net, forcing my muscles into lockstep compliance. Pain lanced through my side, bright and vicious, but I leaned into it, grounding myself the way I'd been trained. Pain was information. Pain meant I was still here. Across the yard, Kael stopped trying to break the barrier. That terrified me more than anything else. He went still. Not frozen, not defeated. Focused. The operatives didn't notice the shift until it was too late. Kael ripped the power conduit out of the control panel with his bare hands. The barrier flared, screamed, and died. Everything happened at once. I tore free as the net slackened, rolling hard to the side as the ground where I'd been standing exploded into sparks and debris. A shot clipped my shoulder, burning, shallow, but I kept moving, grabbing my blade where it had skidded across the concrete. Kael hit the nearest operative, like a force of nature. No hesitation, no restraint. The perfect alpha vanished, replaced by something raw and terrifyingly precise. He moved through them with brutal efficiency, breaking lines, dismantling formations, forcing them to react instead of think. I was already there. We fell into rhythm without looking, without speaking. I covered his blind spots. He shielded my injured side. When one of them tried to flank me, Kael took the hit meant for my spine, energy tearing through his shoulder, dropping him to one knee with a sound that punched the air from my lungs. Kael! He didn't answer. Rage tore through me, hot and blinding. I went feral, slashing, striking, driving the last operative back until he stumbled and fell. The yard fell silent again, broken only by the crackle of dying systems and our ragged breathing. Kael collapsed fully this time. I was at his side instantly, hands shaking as I pressed them to the wound. Blood soaked through my fingers, dark and fast. Too fast. Stay with me, I snapped, like I had any right to order him to do anything. His eyes fluttered open. Still focused. Still calm. You should run, he said hoarsely. They'll send more. I laughed, sharp and breathless. You don't get to tell me what to do. I hauled him upright, half dragging him toward the shadow of the freight. Cars as distant engines started to hum again. Backup. Incoming. I could feel the choice looming, heavy and inevitable. This was my exit. I could leave him, vanish into the forest line while the council cleaned up the mess. Survive, like I always had. Instead, I tightened my grip. We made it to cover, just as shots tore through the space we'd vacated. I shoved him down behind a steel wall, pressing myself between him and the open yard, blade slick in my hand. More operatives poured in, slower this time. Cautious. Asset Fox, one of them called out. Surrender. The Alpha is no longer of use to you. I felt Kael shift weakly behind me, trying to rise. Don't, I hissed. I stepped forward instead. I'm not staying because you caught me, I said clearly, my voice carrying. Across the yard, despite the chaos still humming under the surface. I'm staying because I won. The words settled into me as I said them, solid, unshakable. I wasn't defending him because he was my alpha. I wasn't bound to him by instinct or hierarchy or fate. I was here because I chose to be. The operatives hesitated, just a fraction. Long enough. I moved. The fight that followed wasn't pretty. It wasn't clean. It was desperate and furious, and fueled by something deeper than survival. Kael fought beside me when he could, leaning on me without shame, trusting me without question. When it was over, the yard burned. We stood in the smoke and ruin, both bleeding, both breathing, neither of us owned by anyone. Kael looked at me then, not as a hunter, not as an alpha assessing an omega, as an equal, and for the first time since they'd left me behind with 3 bullets and a broken blade, I knew exactly where I was standing. Not caught, not claimed, free, and choosing to stay. The council didn't fall in a single night. It cracked. Hairline fractures spread through its foundations. Data leaks, failed operations. Hunters who didn't report back. Assets that stopped behaving like assets. Lies stacked on top of lies until the structure that had held itself, upright on fear and procedure, finally collapsed under its own weight. We watched part of it burn from a safe distance. The city below glowed dull red in places where council hubs had been sabotaged, their systems cannibalized by the very failsafes meant to protect them. Emergency broadcasts flickered across public channels, stripped of authority, stripped of certainty, temporary loss of control, internal restructuring. Please remain calm. I almost laughed. We'd taken shelter in the upper levels of an abandoned residential tower. Cracked glass, wind howling through empty rooms. Kael sat on the floor with his back against the wall, his injured shoulder bound tight, his uniform discarded in favor of scavenged clothes that didn't fit him quite right. He looked smaller without the armor, not weaker. Just human. They'll survive, he said quietly, watching the city. Some of them. The council always does. Maybe, I replied. But not like before. That was the point. The system that decided who was useful and who was expendable was gone, not erased. Systems like that never truly vanished, but broken enough that people could see the cracks, enough that they could question it, enough that obedience wasn't the only option left. Kael shifted, wincing. He didn't hide it this time. They stripped my clearance an hour ago, he said. Status revoked. Rank nullified. All authorizations rescinded. I glanced at him. How do you feel about that? He considered the question seriously. Too seriously. Relieved, he said at last. That surprised him more than it surprised me. I was built for it, he continued. For following orders. For believing the structure mattered more than the people inside it. His jaw tightened. Without it, I don't know who I am. I studied him for a moment, the man who'd signed my pack's death warrant, who'd hunted me, who'd chosen to burn everything rather than hand me back. You're someone without a badge, I said. That's a start. A ghost of a smile crossed his mouth. It didn't last. There would be consequences. Trials, maybe. Exile. Hunters who'd once followed him now turning their backs or their weapons on him. Freedom wasn't clean. It came with sharp edges. Outside, a council emblem toppled from the side of a distant building, shattering against the street below. The sound echoed up through the night, final and oddly satisfying. Ash drifted through the open window, settling on the floor between us. I brushed some of it away with my boot. This doesn't make us heroes, I said. No, Kael agreed. It just makes us still standing. I looked back out at the ruined skyline, at a world rearranging itself, around the absence of a power it had depended on for too long. For the first time, the future wasn't mapped out in directives and outcomes. It was uncertain, messy, and mine to walk into. Without a system telling me where I belonged, the council was ash. And from it, something else would have to grow. The quiet took some getting used to. No engines overhead. No alarms buried under layers of protocol. Just whine through broken windows. And the soft, domestic sound of water, heating on a portable unit we'd salvaged from somewhere 2 blocks over. It whistled faintly, uneven and stubborn. Kael watched it like it might attack him. You look like you're calculating how to arrest it, I said. He glanced at me, then at the kettle. It's making a noise. That's called boiling. I know what boiling is. Sure you do. He huffed, actually huffed, and turned away, shoulders loosening a fraction. Progress. We'd moved twice since the council collapsed, keeping ahead of the chaos without running from it. There was no chase anymore, but habits died hard. We shared space the way 2 people who'd fought side by side did, aware, respectful, careful not to step on old wounds. I sat on the floor, cleaning my blade. The tip was still broken. I considered replacing it, then didn't. Some things earned the right to stay damaged. So, I said, not looking up. What now, ex-hunter? He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You tell me. I paused, then smiled despite myself. That's new. I'm trying things, he said dryly. I laughed. The sound surprised both of us. There were no titles between us. No commands. No instinctual pull snapping us into positions we hadn't chosen. When he handed me a cup of lukewarm water, he didn't do it like an alpha offering or an omega accepting. Just 2 people sharing something small. It mattered. You never asked why I go by Fox. I said after a while. He tilted his head. Why do you? I shrugged. Because it's what they called me when they stopped trying to name me. It stuck. He nodded once, absorbing that. Then, after a moment, he said, It suits you. I snorted. Careful. Compliments are a slippery slope. Noted. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was companionable. The kind that didn't demand anything. I stretched, feeling the pull of healing muscles. The familiar ache that told me I was still alive. Still here. You're not my alpha, I said suddenly. He met my gaze without flinching. I know. I'm not yours either. I know that too. A beat. Passed. I'm not a mate, I added, just to be sure. His mouth curved. Faint, but real. Good. I leaned back against the wall, letting myself relax fully this time. No anger snapping me upright. No fear whispering in my ear. Just choice. Just me. Fox. Unclaimed. Unassigned. And exactly where I wanted to be. People like to say survival is instinct. They're wrong. Instinct keeps you alive in the moment. It tells you when to run, when to strike, when to bare your teeth, and make yourself look dangerous enough to be left alone. I was built on instinct, sharpened by it, used by it. Choice came later. I stand at the edge of the forest now, the city a distant smear of light behind me. The world feels wider without borders drawn in threat assessments and kill zones. No drones hum overhead. No voice tells me where I belong. Kael is somewhere close, not watching, not guarding, just there. That matters more than it should. I could leave. I still can. Nothing holds me here. No claim. No bond. No invisible chain dressed up as fate. And that's exactly why I stay. Not because I was captured. Not because I was assigned. Not because someone decided my place for me. They taught me how to fight. I taught myself how to stay. And this time, it's not a trap. It's mine.